I'm Chris Charla. I'm the director of ID at Xbox. Thanks a lot for coming to this talk and coming to GDC and coming to Microsoft Sessions. This talk is called The Most Powerful Game Development Community Ever, which is you guys. I actually don't know how the talk got its title, but I will say that the community of independent developers across the world and on Xbox One especially is just unbelievably fantastic. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to get to meet developers from all over the world, go all over the world to meet developers, and see the amazing games people are making. It's by far the biggest highlight of my job. My favorite part of the day is getting to talk to developers. And having gotten to hang out with some ID devs at our loft yesterday and at our lobby bar, I can confirm that it is the raddest community ever. So thank you if you're part of it. And if you're not part of it, please join. We'll explain how shortly. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about, kind of set the stage for what we're talking about this week at GDC with Microsoft, some of the stuff we're showing. Then I'm going to give a quick update on where we are with ID at Xbox right now. And then I'm going to talk about selling games. I'm going to share some data that's really, really new. I think we developed it on Friday. Last Friday, and so it's early, but we want to sort of share it to be transparent, and then as we continue to develop this data, we'll kind of go on the journey together. But we want to be as open as possible and let you guys know as much of what we're seeing and thinking, and then we'll try and open things up to Q&A pretty early, so we can kind of have the talk be more of a discussion versus like a lecture. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've done since last GDC 2017, but before that, I actually want to take a slightly bigger step back to 37 years ago. So Microsoft has really built its success on enabling partners to do awesome things. And I just want to show, this is a little game made by some early Microsoft staffers, a guy named Bill, a guy named Neil. And they made this as a demo to show IBM what they could do with an operating system. It was that Bill, obviously. And the operating system turned out to work out for everybody. It was MS-DOS. But it really just kind of goes to show that we've always, or we've frequently been able to lead technological innovation with games. That's nothing new to us, and we're still doing it today. It's really who we are at Microsoft, and your success is really our success in that space. So since GDC 2017, we've been working on a few things, and we've brought those here to GDC 2018 to give you a look. So obviously, last year we launched the world's most powerful console, which was a really nice coda to what was already like an amazing year for ID at Xbox developers. We helped really invest in Azure to help you guys really take advantage of cloud computing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We just announced that we've joined with PlayFab, who's a really amazing services provider, and we've got a new version of Visual Studio that's obviously pretty rad as well. But at the center of all these investments that we've made, whether it was PlayFab, the investment we made in bringing the Xbox One X to market, our continuing investment in Azure, the work we're continuing to do to improve Visual Studios, is always you. It's all about you guys, trying to give you guys the tools that you need to delight your partners, delight your customers. And yeah, so it's been pretty cool. And here's a quick look at how things sort of looked on the console side last year. Xbox One X has been amazing to see, and it's been amazing to see how many independent developers have been able to quickly harness the power and enhance their games for Xbox One X. So at GDC 2018 this year, we have a pretty full lineup of stuff. And for just a few examples, since we last met, we've really been busy making improvements for Xbox developers, expanding the capabilities of our gaming cloud. focusing on making our tools faster, more efficient, and more optimized for what you guys need as game developers. And again, at the center of all these investments is you, game developers, and our desire together to delight our partners and our customers. So just want to hit some of the things that you guys should definitely check out today and over the rest of the week. The first is a super cool Azure Expo exhibit in the South Hall on the lower level, just outside the main expo floor. There is a ton of stuff to see and do here. There's live Mixer-enabled game, Darwin Project, that really kind of shows how we're working with Mixer and shows some best practices there. There's just, and I'm not going to read this slide to you, but there are a ton of things to do there. We've brought a lot of the absolute top experts at Microsoft in these spaces who will be giving a lot of micro talks to help you kind of get more out of your platform, more out of our platform for your games. And there's really just a ton going on down there. So I've gotten to be in all the planning. I know everything that's in this booth. This is like the most packed booth in history and just densely packed with information. So definitely spend a little time to see some of the cool innovations that Microsoft's bringing to game developers there. And that's really across all games. It's not focused on Xbox specifically. It's really gaming all up. It is super cool. And then upstairs from that booth is our classic lobby bar. So first of all, happy hour at 4 p.m. Please swing by. And second, we've got 18 Xbox kiosks there. A lot of ID at Xbox developers are there. So please talk to them about their experiences, how they're liking the platform. We're going to be showing between the lobby bar and what we showed at our Loft event a few days ago, showing 50 games over 5 days here at the show. And when you go to the lobby bar, you can also meet with the ID team if you want to have any questions about the program, if you want to show something, if you just want to grab a meeting. We have some office hours to do meetings. There's also PlayFab folks there and a lot more experts to really just help you get going with game development on Microsoft platforms. So here's just a quick look at our GDC. Some of these things already happened, but we have a lot of really cool events for different audiences. Tonight we'll have the IGF Awards. ID at Xbox is a sponsor again. I love that award show. Definitely encourage everybody to come. And you can see that today and tomorrow we have a full slate of sponsored sessions. There'll also be a kind of cool Windows MR reception tomorrow that you should swing by. And let's just take a look at some of the talks that we have. We have 2 full days of talks this year, and frankly, you guys should come to all of them. The ones I'm personally excited about today are the talks on Mixer and PlayFab. Then on our DirectX talk, we're going to be talking about DirectX ray tracing. And then tomorrow, the AI talk is something really, really cool. It's about using AI and machine learning to improve your actual code. So not about necessarily gameplay, but about like engineering your game. So super, super interesting. I know personally I've been doing a lot of work recently around online game communities and how they can be awesome and how they can sometimes not be so awesome. And so the talk on user research is something I'm going to make sure I check out. If you aren't able to make the talks, if you are walking the floor, if you're taking meetings, if you're going to other cool talks, we're recording all these talks. This is why I'm being blinded by lights right now. And they'll all be available on Microsoft's Channel 9 after the show. But definitely a good suite of games. So I'd like to kind of change directions now and really talk about ID at Xbox and then share some sales data. One thing I always want to caveat at the start of any kind of business talk, this talk is largely going to be about money and sales, and I need to preface that by saying that, commercial success, making a bunch of money, is definitely a great way to define success. But there are lots of other ways to define success too. There's creative success of shipping a product that you're proud of. There's personal success of just shipping something or being in the game industry and getting to work on a game. And so when we talk about success in this talk and we talk about commercial success, I don't want you to think that that's the only metric we think of. But it is a metric where our interests at Microsoft and your interests as developers are most closely aligned. And so it's easy for us to kind of focus on that. But I just want to caveat and say that I'm going to give you a bunch of data and a bunch of suggestions about things that will help you maximize your sales. If you want to just ignore all those and make a totally different game that breaks all those rules, you should do it. And we're excited to have those games on our platform. this is just a caveat that this is going to be a sales talk. But at the end of the day, what really matters to us is having great games for players on Xbox, and that comes from developers making games they want to make and bringing diversity to our lineup. So it's just important to say. So it's been a great year for ID at Xbox. I just want to turn to some stats and then probably get into a little bit more specific data before we get to questions. So things are going really well for independent developers on Xbox One these days. Happy to have almost 2,800 studios that have dev kits in hand, and that compares to fewer than 700 studios that were registered developers during the entire history of Xbox 360. To me, that speaks both to the market changes and kind of this amazing kind of Cambrian explosion of independent developers that we've had in the last 10 years, but also that we're doing a pretty good job getting dev hardware out there. We've had nearly 800 games ship via ID at Xbox. It's hard to count. Hard to count exactly, just because we have a lot of games in our Xbox Game Preview program, and we don't know if we're supposed to count those as shipped or not, because they're on the platform and you can buy them, but they're not 1.0. Did they ship? So we'll say close to 800. And we have more than 1,000 on the way. Actually, way more than 1,000. And that's all awesome. But to me, the most important thing is that players are responding super well to the games you guys make. More than 4 billion hours have been invested in playing games that came through the ID at Xbox program. Since we launched the first game back in 2014. I think that's like 150 years of game time. That's pretty cool. And players have been drawn to the games such that they've spent more than $1 billion on games that came through the ID at Xbox program since we launched the program. And it's a lot of money. It's pretty rad. So that's pretty cool. So I think that means a couple things. First, I think we've proven that we have a really sustainable market on Xbox right now. With 800 titles available just from devs shipping via ID, to say nothing of our third-party or lots of great first-party games, we also have a really mature, robustly stocked marketplace. There are a lot of games that you can buy on Xbox One today. So it's kind of interesting to think about what that means. Does that mean things are getting crowded? Is it tougher to stand out? And I would argue that while it's always a challenge to stand out, and I think as independent developers, other than making a great game, is probably the #1 challenge folks face, I think the evidence suggests that our market is a great place to ship games right now and a great place where you can stand out. So I want to show this graph, and I need to explain it a little bit, but this is probably my favorite graph of the last 10 years. So the bars on the left show in each grouping, there's 2 bars, like a green bar and a blue bar, and they show the revenue from the top 20 ID at Xbox games in the first half of our fiscal 18. So that is July to December 2017, so basically the last 6 months of last year. And the bars on the right in each grouping show the top 20 games for the first half of our fiscal 17. So that would have been same time period in 2016, July through December. So this is kind of an apples-to-apples comparison. Now, the game in each specific place, whether it's first or 10th or 16th or whatever, that might be a completely different game. This is just comparing the game that was in first in FY17 versus the game that was in first in FY18, et cetera. But what's stunning to me about this graph is just the magnitude of the difference, just how much more money the top 20 games earned in FY18 versus FY17. And I will tell you, in FY17, we were running around high-fiving at how well the program was doing, and then FY18, we're also running around high-fiving at how well developers are doing in the program. It's been really fantastic to see. And to me, this is just a testament to how healthy the marketplace is on Xbox One, and how successful a developer can be at the high end. And at the high end of this chart are like many tens of millions of dollars in this time period. So even as the marketplace is getting a really sustained inflow of titles, revenue is actually growing per title in this top 20 and more than that, which is pretty cool. So what am I saying with this? Am I saying you should all be developing for Xbox? Yes, that's literally what I'm saying. You should all be developing for Xbox. The market opportunity is ridiculously good. But I digress. This is our top 20. We have a lot of different metrics or sort of cohorts of titles that we look at in terms of sales, and we've seen lots of growth in a lot of them. So not just this ridiculous tier, but also the $500,000 to $1 million cohort, or the $1 million to $5 million cohort, and so on. And we've seen like nearly 3x growth year to year in some of these cohorts. And to be clear, these cohorts are for revenues inside a fiscal year. It's not lifetime revenue for a title. So marketplace feels really good, and having a top 10 game, if you're in the ID at Xbox program, I would say is probably a life-changing event in terms of your success, maybe a generational changing event in terms of your success. But I think it's also really important, just as an industry, that we start to recognize that when we think about independent developers, we can't really think about one definition of success or one metric of success for independent developers. The market is big enough today to support a lot more than one definition of success. If you're a single-person dev team and you work for 2 years and you ship your game on Xbox and it makes $600,000 in its first year, that's a pretty interesting event. Even if it makes $300,000 or $200,000, that can be pretty interesting as well. And if you're a 5 or 6 person team and your first month's sales are $200K or even $75K, again, that can be pretty interesting when you start to think about the sustained tail of your game. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about tails. So, when people talk about digital game sales, we always talk about tails and talk about the long tail of sales and that kind of thing. But what do we mean by that? And I think as a developer, it's worthwhile thinking about what you can expect from the tail of your game as you start to plan, not just for like making one game, but for building a career and building, possibly building a studio that, you hopefully want to keep doing this for a really long time. We certainly want you guys to keep doing this for a really long time. So I want to show off a couple different tail styles that we see on Xbox One. And a lot of sales advice that I've given in talks over the past has been generally applicable across all platforms. I do think this tail data is probably more unique to Microsoft than most data that we share. And I guess I should also admit that in the past, we've probably been a little bit guilty of focusing on the left end of the graph, the games that are making the tens of millions, and trying to understand when we do our data analysis why they're doing that and how we can help them. But as our marketplace has grown really dramatically, we're seeing some interesting things happen. We work with developers of all sizes and scales, and we think that's one of the greatest things about the ID at Xbox program, and frankly, one of the greatest things about the independent development community. But we see teams that are, single-person team, one woman, one man, just working away. We see teams that are kind of classic team size, like Super Nintendo size, 6 to 8 people. We see teams that are like PlayStation size, sort of 12 to 15, maybe up to 20. And then we see, Xbox 360 size and Xbox One size. We see 100-person, multiple 100-person teams coming through the ID program. And what's really cool is we're seeing developers have success at all those scales. Including outsized success, so not just a standard Super Nintendo hit, but like a super amazing Super Nintendo hit, or PlayStation hit, or 360 hit, or whatever. And to be honest, to be fair, and something we all have to think about, we've seen failures as well. Video games are a hit-driven business, and I don't think that's ever going to change. So as much as there's opportunity for amazing success, it is a hit-driven business, and there's also opportunities to not succeed. So I'm going to share a few data points on tails that we've seen, and really just about the shapes of tails, not so much about the scale and everything like that. But some of this data is pretty new. As I mentioned, some of this was developed on Friday, and we're seeing some interesting things start to emerge. So I'm going to touch on those, but I want to caveat this really strongly, that what I'm about to show you is probably like 8 or 9 data points, and don't read too much into it. We want to share this because it's new, it's fresh, it's interesting. If I knew somebody had this data and I was a developer, I would definitely want to know it. But we will keep working on this. We will share more on this in the future, and maybe whether it's at Gamescom or maybe PAX or something, maybe, or certainly next year at GDC, we'll give you an update and show things. But we want to show some things that we're seeing now. because this is a place we've really been digging in, and it's really showing, the more we do research on this, we're really seeing just how sustainable our marketplace is for developers over a long period, which is pretty rad. So first, I want to just show, this was a story-based game. It didn't have any DLC. And this is kind of like a really classic sales decay curve and long tail cycle for a game. You see this big spike at the beginning, pretty rapid drop off, and then into your real long tail phase. And then you've got some spikes that are sales that this game participated in. So this is a typical graph of what a digital video game sales curve looks like when there's no DLC. And this next one, this is what a free-to-play game looks like. I will caveat this really quickly and say this is an average of a couple games. This isn't based on one individual game. But I assure you, this is very typical for what we see for a service-based game on Xbox One that has a lot of post-sale monetization options. So the scale here is actually more than double the previous slide. For the first month, that's more than twice as high as the last slide. But you can see, in contrast to that game, which kind of had this, classic decay curve. Month one is actually the worst performing month for this game. It's generally, going up and staying, really high. Dips largely track with the release timing of major AAA games, especially those that have a strong multiplayer component. But the lesson here, and I want to be clear about this, is not that you should go make a service-based game. I want to be really clear, you should make whatever game you want, and our support for you as a developer is going to be the exact same whether you're making a single-player story-based game with no DLC or a multiplayer service-based game. I just want to show you what the different tails look like so you can have an idea of how your games might perform post-launch on Xbox One. So I want to go back to our single-player story-based, no DLC game, and just show this. And now I want to layer on another game. So this blue line represents a game, and these games are pretty close in a lot of ways. They're sold at the same price. They launched around the same time of year. They have almost exactly the same user review score. And they had a similar level of marketing support from Microsoft. And both these games had pretty modest marketing support from Microsoft. They got all the stuff that every game gets, being in new releases, being featured on Xbox Wire, Major Nelson, that kind of thing, but not a lot of additional support. And so what's interesting about this is the launch month of this game was only about 52%, 50% really, of the story-based game. But its drop has been a lot more gradual, and its tail has been a lot fatter. It looks like it had one sale there, but maybe it made a little bit impact overall because of how fat the tail already was. So this is kind of interesting. You can also see that the second game, this blue game, has only been on sale about 3/4 of the length of time of the first game. So I think lifetime, these games have made like the same amount of money within just like a few $1,000s. And I think lifetime, we can expect the second game to catch up and actually exceed game one. So what's the difference? Well, game two is an action game where you can blow things up. It's in a pretty uncrowded subgenre. But the real lesson from this slide, I think there's two things. One is that there's just multiple ways to earn the same amount of revenue. Not all tails are going to look the same, even when results are broadly similar. And I guess the other thing to consider is launch month and that sort of thing. But anyway, I really just want to show a couple of common case scenarios here, and then also assure you that odd case scenarios do happen. But this is just kind of interesting. And one thing that I think is interesting is that the blue game, the game that has the fatter tail, has been on sale for less time than the green game. So next, I'm going to show kind of the impact of DLC on your tail. So this is the tail of an action game. It was a super fun game. You can see it looks broadly similar to the story-based game. Big drop from launch into long tail, and then some sales that really spike things up. And I should stress, none of these graphs have the same scale unless I'm overlaying them than they do. If I don't chart them together, it's a totally different scale. So I want to lay this one over. This blue title is also an action game, same price, slightly better user score, but it has DLC available. Now they did have, let's see if I can get my mouse cursor over here. They had a really big update event here that was probably responsible for that big spike. But you can see that even before that, the tail just looks completely different. And so even with only half the impact month one, it's a game that's already outperformed a game that's been out for basically twice as long. And so one question we're getting, and one question we're kind of asking ourselves is our tail shape changing? You know, both these comparison examples, in both these comparison examples I've given you, the newer game had a much smaller launch relative to the older game, but a much fatter tail, and ultimately was earning, you know, more money over given time period. So this is new data. This is the thing we're really going to be digging into and thinking about. And this is something that I think is emerging from us having a really sustainable, mature store. And I think it's really interesting. But I don't have a lot of conclusions to draw here. I just thought this data was cool, and I knew if I was a developer, I'd like to see it. So watch this space, come back next year, check out our white papers and our blog, so we may have more to share. You know, is this just an anomaly that we've seen a couple times, or is this really something? Like, I have a theory, personally, but we'll wait till we have more data to share. But I just wanted to kind of share that with you guys. So the question we get a lot from folks is, can you change your tail? And the answer is a qualified yes. So this title really did change its tail. They did something several months in that suddenly made the game very popular with streamers for at least a little while, and they saw this huge spike. And that is a really significant, the amount of area under that spike is really significant compared to how they did previously. And I would say that it really did change their tail. If you look at how, if you think back to the service game tail I showed you, you clearly can manipulate your tail. That was a very interesting graph. But it's something that has to be done, in our experience, what we've seen, it has to be done with either changes to the game or additions to the game. It's unlikely that marketing or sales alone can do more than give you kind of a temporary spike to your long tail. But DLC, major updates can really change your tail shape. And at the extreme, as I mentioned, you have the service-based games where they're really growing their tail month to month, and your launch month is typically your worst month. But even one piece of DLC can really make a difference. And this is a little bit of an aside, but while I'm kind of on the subject of DLC, when's the best time to release DLC? In our experience, the answer is the sooner the better. It gives people, if they're enjoying the game, an opportunity to get an additional way to enjoy the game. It shows people who might be on the fence about whether or not they want to go out on the game that you're supporting the game in kind of a robust way, and that might make them feel better about joining in. And of course, obviously, once it's out, you're maximizing the impact that you can have long term. So in terms of managing your game's tail, and again, I want to reiterate, we are not trying to tell you what kind of game to make. But I think to be a smart studio, to be good business people as well as great creators, I think you do need to understand where you might fall. If you're doing a game that is a no DLC, story-based game, single player, you're going to see a much higher fraction of your sales month one than if you've got some DLC or you're approaching doing kind of a service model. And I want to make it just explicitly clear that is totally cool, and we are 100% on board with that. I mention it only so that as you're doing your planning for how you're going to manage your studio and how you're going to fund your next game, you can understand what the impact is likely to be of the game. I will say that if it makes sense, I've certainly encouraged you to consider DLC or add-ons for your game, because I think they really do change your tail shape in a really positive way. And on some platforms, and I would say PC especially, there's kind of an economy where you can mine an infinite number of tokens, and those tokens seem to find their way to dodgy sites where you don't get revenue for them. And you get to a situation where older games can quickly have very little value. And I would argue, and I think the data shows, that's not true on Xbox. Even when you are in your long tail, games still sell at full price for years. And it's definitely something to consider when you're picking a development platform, that long tail, and if you've released like 4 or 5 games over the years, those those numbers stack, and it can actually become really meaningful amount of revenue for you. And finally, I know I didn't show any scale on the tails that I showed you, but your tail is always going to be a function of your launch. Whether you're a service game looking to go up from your launch month or a story game that's probably going to go down from your launch month, maximizing your launch is really key. And even with the phenomenon we saw where games are having less dramatic launch month versus their the thickness of their tail, the better your launch, the more happy you're going to be with your tail. There's one exception to that, and that is Xbox Game Preview. So your tail is always going to be a function of your launch. What we've seen with Xbox Game Preview, and there's just not enough data points to really share this in a graph form, is that 1.0 launches out of Game Preview on Xbox definitely can see a launch spike that kind of resets where your tail is going from in a really interesting way. So if you've thought about Xbox Game Preview and wondered, am I going to go 1.0 and the curve still looks the same? That's not always the case. Like, it can actually really reset the curve in a way that you'd probably be pretty happy with. So what can you do to maximize your launch on Xbox One? These are just general things, and I'm probably just going to read these slides, and these are all really, really important. The first one is please check your metadata. When you are building a game on Xbox One, in a large part you are operating without a net. You can do things like set your launch date incorrectly. Your game won't show up in new releases. If that happens, we will help you fix it as fast as possible. It will take several hours for that to propagate through the system. And those are hours that people are not seeing your game in new releases. New releases is the #1 most trafficked place on the store. If your game isn't there, you're losing sales, and it's a mega bummer. So please check your metadata. Second one, focus on your store assets like it's the most important part of game development. I would argue that it is one of the most important parts of game development. On Xbox right now, you can upload a maximum number of screenshots. Make sure you maximize that number of screenshots. We definitely see a relationship between number of screenshots uploaded and conversions from looking at the game's details page to purchases. Make sure those screenshots are the best screenshots you've ever taken in your life. I know during development, I used to be a developer and was asked to make screenshots by publishers, and it's always at a time in development when you're like really tired and cranky and you just want to be done, and there's this huge temptation to just hit the space bar 6 times and send a bunch of screenshots to the start menu and stuff. Don't do that. That really hurts your sales. The screenshots that you upload need to be super evocative of your game, the coolest scene, the most, the thing that is going to make people want to play your game as much as possible. Please set time aside to really focus on those screenshots. Make sure that your store text is as punchy and I don't want to say salesy, but as punchy as possible and as encouraging to purchase as possible. I also really encourage you to look at the store when you're thinking about your metadata. Look at other games' descriptions. Look for words and descriptions that appeal to you, and think about how to craft your description that way as well. When you think about your metadata, you can put in keywords so people searching for your game can find them. Think about good keywords. Think about misspellings. Don't use another company's game as a keyword. We're onto that. We take it out. But yeah, if you're not a native English speaker and you're focused on sales in North America, maybe try and find a native English speaker to help you write your sales text. Similarly, if you are a native English speaker and you don't speak another language, don't try and use a machine translation to do your metadata and your store description for other countries. It will be terrible. It will really upset people in that country because it is very disrespectful, and they won't buy your game. Either pay the only thing we require you to translate on Xbox is that store description. Either pay the small amount of money it would take to get that professionally translated, or work with somebody in the community to get that translated. Please don't use a website to do the translation for you. Next one is box art. Box art is incredibly crucial for a digital game. No matter how good of a job of promotion you do before your game launches, the majority of people who see your game on the store are seeing it for the first time. You should look at the market, and this is general across all platforms, you should look at the marketplace where you're going to be selling the game to understand what you should make your box art look like. You should definitely design your box art for the living room. Don't design your box art for sitting at your computer and it looks great there, and then 10 feet away on a couch you can't read the logo. Like, really think about your box art and think about it from a perspective of someone sitting on their couch in their living room looking at the screen. And then don't make it sleazy. If you think that making sleazy box art is going to get people to click on it, you're wrong. They won't buy it, and we won't promote it, so don't be gross. Get through CERT as early as possible. We will always help you get through CERT. If you are having trouble, we will work with you to get you through there. But the faster you can get through CERT, the faster you can talk about your release date on Xbox. And building release date awareness we see as a really critical thing. Once people have heard about your game, they've played it at PAX, they've seen it at the lobby bar, they've seen it on Twitter, they've seen people streaming it, they're totally stoked for it, you want them to buy it. And one of the greatest ways you can cement that purchase decision is tell them exactly when it's coming out. Like, hey, this game is coming out August 18th. And the more you can talk about August 18th, don't forget, buy my game, talk about it till you're blue in the face, the more people who are into the game kind of mentally spend the money. And on August 18th, they wake up, they're like, what do I need to do today? Oh, I need to buy that game. And hopefully you've also done a pre-order and they can actually buy the game even before August 18th. You should talk to us about launch timing, and a good time to reach out to us is about 6 months before you think you're going to launch. And talk to us about when is good, both what day is good, what week is good. We'll let you know if there's something big coming that you might want to avoid. Some of the conventional wisdom on launch timing is kind of fluid right now. The one thing I will say is third quarter is not a great time to launch, and what we see the first half of the year, and really like February to 2 or 3 weeks before E3 is like a fantastic time to launch. But talk to us, because some of our wisdom here and some of the data here is changing, and we're happy to share it. But it's it's fluid and that sort of thing. And then lastly, and this is probably one of the biggest ones, is avoid the shadow of a really big game if you can. If there's a big game coming out, especially a game that has a really robust multiplayer component, people may be playing that game for weeks or months after it launches. If you launch into that shadow, especially if you're in a similar genre or similarly need like a lot of multiplayers. Fans, there is going to be a shadow there. And it doesn't mean you can't launch there. It doesn't mean you can't be successful in the shadow of a game. But I would say it's probably better to be out before a big game that's going to have a big shadow than afterwards. So how can you understand how your game is going to perform? So I sort of showed some tail stuff. But one thing that we talk about when we talk about this with folks is understand how crowded your genre is. What's the, if there's 90 releases on your chosen genre last year on Steam, and one broke out, just looking at that one breakout game might not be the best comp. Like, look at the, what the best case scenario was, what the worst case scenario was, and then what the mean is, or the median is, like what the average is, like what's right in the middle, as you're trying to develop, what potential comps could be for your games. And also, I always encourage people to look beyond just genre to art style, to what platform you're shipping on, what kind of tone the game has, what the storyline is like when you're building comps. Try and look at it multidimensionally. Of course, we've talked a lot about tail potential. I think that's just important when you think about the long-term potential performance of your game. And then finally, Steam Spy. I think Steam Spy is awesome. I visit Steam Spy probably every day. It's really better for comparing launches and deriving long-term sales trends, because I think that because of token minting and things that happen, the data gets pretty fuzzy after the first 30 to 60 days. And so it's definitely an awesome tool, which I use all the time. But it's something that you just want to be really thoughtful there about making sure that you're focused on. It's a great way for evaluating launches, but yeah. So lastly, I just want to talk about what our community offers you, what the community of players on Xbox offers you. When I look at the Xbox store right now, I see an incredibly robust and sustainable marketplace, sustained marketplace. It is amazing. I think it's a fantastic place. Video games are a hit-driven business. You know, not every game is going to be a success, but Xbox has an incredibly passionate player base who has the potential to turn any game into a big hit. We routinely hear anecdotally from developers that our players are the most valuable. Can't tell you exactly what that means because I can't get everybody to make all their data public, but I can tell you that our players are awesome. Xbox fans are like the best, and they love games, they play a lot of games, they buy a lot of games, and it is a really, really great platform to reach really passionate, committed gamers. You know, I guess I just want to finish by saying, you know, I'm really pleased and proud that we have such a great marketplace, because that really enables you guys to keep making money and keep doing what you love, making your art and making games, and that means, you know, our players are just going to have super great games for the foreseeable future, and it's just incredible. I think we're in the middle on Xbox right now of a really beautiful virtuous cycle between the platform, you guys as developers, and of course the people we all love, which is our super passionate players and fans.